Steve Cardenas, originally from Kansas City, has been a cherished part of the New York City jazz scene since 1995. Celebrated for his collaborations with Paul Motian, Charlie Haden, and Steve Swallow. He's also released seven acclaimed albums as a bandleader, including Healing Power, the music of Carla Bley. A dedicated educator, Cardenas teaches at the New School and co-authored the Thelonious Monk Fake Book, the first complete collection of Monk's compositions. And I'm really excited he's going to be joining me today. So, Steve, good to see you.
Good to see you, and this is Elvie. She loves to Zoom bomb.
I have two guests today.
Yeah. She got started early. She got started in the intro before I even said a word.
She just knew that you were going to be on a podcast today. It's like you need to make your statement.
It's so funny. She kind of knows. She
Yeah.
just knows. I could be sitting up here doing anything else, but once there's this going on.
Yeah, cats just have that natural,
Mhm.
intuitiveness about them, right?
Yep. Yep. Basically, they want attention.
Yeah. So, Steve, I thought a good place to start would be to talk about one of the coolest concerts I had ever seen before, which was at the Iridium. I probably was around 2015 or 16. It was seeing you play with John Patitucci's band with two guitars with Adam Rogers and Brian Blade. And then I thought about that, how you had also played with Paul Motian, and the guitar was such an important part of his band. Were there any similarities you felt at playing in two bands like that? Where they're similar, but also, being led by two distinct voices?
Um, I mean, really the only similarity between those two groups is just the fact that there were two guitars.
Hmm.
Just because the music was so different. Paul, I mean, when I first joined, I'll give you a little backstory. When I first joined Paul's group, it was that was in 1997. That was the Electric Bebop Band. And when we did that first tour I did with him, it was still mostly kind of a bebop repertoire. So Monk tunes, Charlie Parker, Miles, Bud Powell, with just maybe a couple or so of Paul's tunes, which is what he originally intended, was just to focus on that music. So a few years later, some personnel changes happened, and he started bringing in more of his own tunes. I think he just kind of it may be a combination of, he had a sense that the sound of the group was maybe going a little, I won't say freer, but a little more open. Or maybe he just wanted to just bring in more of his music and try it with a larger ensemble. That might actually have been more the case. Because it did end up doing a lot of the same tunes that he had already recorded, say with the trio with Frizzell and Lovano, as well as the quintet with those guys. But because this was a little larger group, some of those tunes didn't have chord changes, and he added chord changes because we had a larger ensemble, two guitars, two tenors, and he felt like we needed a little more to work with. He even said that to me.
Yeah, so you
And
really liked the two guitar thing, huh? Like it
he
was.
like, well, for the Electric Bebop Band originally started with just two guitars. I think the first record was just two guitars, and then Joshua Redman, just one saxophone as a guest. So I think he had actually done a tour with just two guitars. At that time, that was early 90s. So it was about 5 years before I joined. It was Brad Shepik and Kurt Rosenwinkel.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then Stomo Takeshi on electric bass. And Paul's idea was to just have it be electric, and but playing this repertoire that's mostly associated with acoustic music.
Yeah, it's such a cool
Hmm.
concept, and all those concerts. Do you have any specific memories from any, like maybe one moment or something that was really special about? I mean, I'm sure there were countless, but when you ask about that, does one thing stick out to you, a certain night? You might remember what was it about the night, you think, or just the
It's
environment?
hard. It's hard. I mean, there's so many great memories, and I feel like I've completely like sidestepped your original question, which I will get back to, the similarities or differences between John's group and Paul's. But I mean, we did a few tours. They would be about 3 weeks. When I joined, like I said, it was '97, so we did a 3 week tour, and then the next year we did another tour, and then we did a record. That was the first record I was on, which was Monk and Bud Powell, the music of Monk and Bud Powell, called Monk and Powell. And so, I mean, we went to China during that same year in '98 and played two concerts, went to the Great Wall. I mean, there's stuff like that that's just, I would never have done anything like that, on my own,
Yeah.
That would be a really expensive trip.
Did he like to hang too? Because it seemed like he just had, just watching certain
Yeah,
documentary style videos that he,
not really, but it wasn't like he was, um, I mean, I think he just liked to, after the gig, just kind of go chill, go back to his room. There was a couple of times, one time I remember in Dublin, or it was our first concert of a tour, that he came out to the pub and
oh,
hung with
okay.
us. And there was a couple of the promoter uh, people there. It was a couple of women that were very nice, and they sat on either side of him, and he seemed very happy. And we were all hanging and just having a great time. So he would do that sometimes,
Yeah.
but not very often. And it was never a thing like he was trying to be reclusive or because I'll say the one thing for sure from the moment I joined, even the moment I met him, I could tell he really thought of his band like family. He just treated us like we were all that we were we're in this thing and we were all so happy to be a part of it. Yeah, he was a great band leader. He was a great band leader on so many levels. Um, I
Is
could
that
go
what makes a good
on.
band leader? That openness that we're in this together as opposed to like, you need to follow me
I
and
mean, there's so many. There are great band leaders that maybe weren't like that, but they got results. So I don't think there's like one recipe for that. In Paul's case, it just kind of made us always feel welcome and into it. It's not to say we didn't, you're on the road and you have like obstacles that are kind of, like, oh boy, just trying to get from one place to another or something like that.
and I would think when you play with someone who could just swing like that,
Oh my
like
God. Yeah.
it must take your playing to places that you never imagine, or what I would think it would be something like that because it's its own thing the way he would swing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it may be needless to say, but I'll say it anyway. I'd been such a fan of his long before I ever played with him. And I'd listened to him on the Bill Evans records and then on the Keith Jarrett records and then the trio, his own records and with Liberation Music Orchestra on those first records, or actually the first few. And so by the time I started playing, and I was just thrilled that he even like called,
Yeah.
you know. But the thing, because had other people ask me this, and they'll say, "Is it really difficult to play with Paul Motian because he plays kind of out of time?" And it seemed, I said, "Man, it's actually the opposite." Um, First of all, we all know that his background is such that he swung his ass off. He just like his core note, his beat was so down the middle and so swinging. Every recording you ever hear, like of that, and he never lost that. It evolved over time. It got maybe a little wider, if for lack of a better description. But the thing is, even when we played rubato, his out of time music or whatever out of time, you still felt that center of time and direction. It never felt confusing or ambiguous. It was always clear
Yeah.
because he would do things that would tie off phrases or set up the next phrase or whatever. He was so compositional and always listening to what was going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I mean, originally we were talking about, I love this. It's fine that we went off topic a little bit. I mean, this is great stuff. Um, but when you played with John's band with the two guitars, were you able to
Mhm.
take those experiences you had playing with the second guitar player into that situation, or was more like I'm just going in with a clear, no concept, just because it's such a we don't see people playing in two guitar groups like that, it's just we don't
Yeah.
see it, that's all.
Well, I've played in a lot of two guitar groups, but before I go off on another tangent, I'll answer your question. So, the thing is, I think you bring everything you've ever done into each situation, even just because musical experience, there's always something, even if, like, for instance, Paul's group is a little different musically, conceptually, but John's, all those guys, Adam and Brian and John are they're such amazing musicians and they're so creative and that they're ready for anything at any time. And so John had told me I've known him for a long time, and he had told me years before we actually got together that he had it in mind to get me and Adam and Brian together and do a
Ah,
group. He
this
told
was
me
like
this,
in Inception, like
and
wow,
he like 15 years or 10 years ahead of time. He was
wow.
just like, I want to do this, band, and then, I wouldn't see him that often. Then he'd say it again. I'd be like, yeah, okay, come on. But I guess just like the window just was perfect, It was late 2014, I think we recorded that record, Brooklyn. And so we hadn't done a gig. He had had a few tunes. He had a couple of Monk tunes he wanted to do. Uh, and we had enough material to do the record. And even though we'd all played together, I hadn't played a ton with Adam, but I knew Adam, and I knew, I was a fan of his, and I was looking forward to playing with him. And Brian, I'd played with in John Cowherd's Mercy Project with John already, so I already felt the connection with them as a rhythm section. So even in the studio, it felt good. It already felt kind of like a band. But you saw us, and you were right about that time period because 2015 was at Iridium was probably our first gig, right as the record came out. And then we went on a tour. I think we went to Japan, and next year, same thing.
Yeah, that was one of those
And
concerts I went to, and like, I can't lie. Sometimes I go to concerts and I'm like, all right, I've kind of like, I'm ready to go. But that concert was like, I just could have listened to you guys play all night.
oh man, we could have played all night.
I believe it.
This thing, I knew there would be band chemistry, and John knew that. So, I mean, and I knew that he knew that. So, um, getting back to what you were saying, it just, um, even though a lot of what we were doing, well, John's eclectic, like, and he knew that we all were as well. We like to play swinging, bebopish things. We like to play funky things, play more, I don't know, modal, whatever, however you want to describe. We just like to play music, and that's the thing. None of us were really felt, we're the kind of musicians that we don't like to do just one thing, but yet we feel like that whatever, even if we're doing diverse kinds of musical styles, oh, these words, that we still feel like we are who we are and we're not just changing hats. That's the thing. So, in that regard, there's that. I feel like that's a carryover from like Paul's group because you're just kind of thinking everything you ever did and how you could kind of do anything, it'll work. I remember one gig in Japan when we were playing at Cotton Club there. We had a week-long run. And we would, play kind of the same tunes. We didn't have a huge repertoire. We would add a few tunes. John would add a few tunes, for the tour. And there was some tune. can't remember which tune it was of his, but you know, we wouldn't, even though we'd play the same tunes, we wouldn't play them always the same way. You know, there was one time where I think I just kind of spontaneously, when it came to my solo, I just kind of went completely left and hit like, you know, the tremolo, and those guys, I'll never forget this. Those guys just immediately just responded like they were expecting it. It was incredible, which I can also attribute just, you know, with Brian and John playing with Wayne for all that time,
Yeah.
which I would pretty much imagine anything could happen at any moment in that group,
No,
you
but those are the
know.
moments, those magical moments you're talking about. That's
Yeah,
just,
yeah. Yeah, that's, you know, Cotton Club, I think they videoed everything. That would be a, I don't usually like to go and revisit gigs that I play, but I would be curious to see what that sounded like.
yeah. Steve, I also want to talk to you about teaching as well, because in the last 10 years, with all the advances of social media and all the free, accessible content that there is, do you find that when students come to you, that it's almost as if that, I mean, this, I would just imagine this, I mean, I don't know, or like that they're coming in as if maybe some students were like finishing their studies with you and playing that way, they're already coming in like at such a higher level because of the information, or has the information made it more confusing for them because there's so much of it?
No, this is a good question, you know, but I think the best way I can answer it, well, first of all, I only teach at the new school as far as in person goes, which is something that I made a decision even before the pandemic. I just, there was a certain point where I just didn't want to teach it. I just wanted my home to be home. I didn't want to teach out of the place. And I was going to the new school a couple days a week to do ensembles, that it was easy to do those lessons around those ensembles, just book them around the ensemble, and then I could book a room for the semester. And so there's that. And so I didn't feel the need to to teach lessons outside of the new school. It felt like enough, couple of days a week. But when the pandemic hit, then I taught, you know, we all learned Zoom pretty quickly. And then I realized, you know, I'm kind of okay with this. And so post pandemic, I I have just like a few Zoom students, not many, and sometimes it just somebody will kind of ease on, and we kind of move on, and then someone else will come in. So that said, um, what I would say about that is that each person there are some things that are kind of common denominators between each musician, but still there's always something or some things that are so individual and particular to that person. So it's one thing to go online. I've checked out some, you just kind of go down the rabbit hole, sorry for the pun, but on the YouTube, and you start checking out, just kind of see what's there. And some people do really amazing presentations. I was asked by my music masterclass to do, and I did a couple. I never felt like I was good at that, but Adam Small, who ran it, really he kind of, I wouldn't say he talked me into it, but he made it so it was easy for me to do it. And then I did like one or two of those, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm much better if I'm live with somebody, whether it's online or one-on-one. I feel like the material's just gonna sink in better. It's not that you can't learn. You can definitely learn some things, especially some basic things. But when you have somebody right there and you talk about it and you demonstrate and you hear them play it and then you make comments, that to me is irreplaceable.
Even just seeing the way their finger is on the
Yeah,
fretboard or something.
and I have a very open uh, when it comes to guitar. I'm not like strict about, oh, you must hold the pick this way or I just kind of look to make. I say, look, Does your when you do that, does your hand hurt? Do you feel tight? No. Okay, that works for you. Fine. I just say if it's not causing pain or you feel like you're not constricted technically, then you're probably okay. That's pretty open. I know some people are like, oh no. But we're all built a little differently. I mean, just look at the kind of how many different ways people hold picks. It's
That
crazy.
we have a whole separate conversation about.
Oh man, it's incredible, and just the little nuances of just how like somebody holds with their second finger. I think Mike Moreno does that. McLaughlin does this thing where he kind of like curls around his two fingers. It's just wild. And then some people float, and some people anchor, and
Yeah,
then I hold it like this, which is kind of like Benson and Jim
you're right.
Hall.
Hmm.
And then there's that, which is like the Mel Bay, and a lot of great players play. And I've tried to do that. And I can't do
Yeah.
it. So it's like we have to find what works and then build on that.
Yeah, I mean, what's exciting you these days? I mean, in 2024, with the music, can you talk a little about some, things you're working on or stuff you're looking forward to in the new year? What's exciting you as we close the year?
I I'm so lucky to be part of such cool groups. It's not that they necessarily work all the time, but that's just normal jazz musicians. You're a part of several groups, and then
Ebbs and flows, right?
this band goes out, does a week or 10 days or something. Then this band goes out, or you freelance a bit and part of this person's record project or whatnot. The main groups that I'm a part of are Ben Allison, or with Ben Allison, Ted Nash, a trio. And that was that Healing Power record. That's really not my record as a leader. That's co-led by the three of us. And we had put out, I mean, our first record we done with that trio was kind of the music of Jim Hall and some Jimmy Jufrey. And Ben had arranged that situation. So we weren't even sure like how we were defining ourselves. We were just doing this project. So Ben, it looks like he's the leader, which he was on that project. And then Ted had the idea to do West Side Story music. So he that he's it looks like he's the leader on that, which he did. It was his idea. So I came up with the idea of doing Carla's music simply because I played with her in Swallow's Quintet and Liberation Music Orchestra, not in her groups. She generally didn't have guitar, although she had Hiram Bullock in her bands in the 80s, which was incredible. But boy, did I learn a lot just being around her and getting to know her musically and personally. Just an amazing person, as well as Swallow, just wow, those guys. She's deeply missed. A
You
lot
know,
of these.
do you know the record is I could be wrong about this. Oh no, I with Steve Swallow and Jim Hall, the Art Farmer at the
Oh yeah, live at the half note.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I I feel like when you mention Steve Swallow, that's the first record that comes to my
There,
mind.
man. Yeah, because he was playing upright then.
Hmm.
There's also some great YouTube of him and Jim Hall with Bob Moses on drums. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe, well, it has to be before a certain, maybe 66 or something around there, 65, 66. Really amazing. And so, speaking of Swallow, um, just did a new record. He had written new music last winter and wanted to record it. And so we did that in September with a quintet, which was Chris Cheek on tenor and Mike Rodriguez on trumpet, Gil Goldstein piano, and Adam Nussbaum on drums.
Oh, that's great.
We've all played with each other, but not in this particular configuration. Um, you know, I'm tangenting, but as I think of things, I just got to say, so that's I'm looking forward for that record coming out for sure. Swallow wrote incredible music as always. Um, Two guitar bands I've been in a lot of them, not just Patitucci and Paul's, but Joey Barron had a band called Killer Joey for 10 years. That was myself and Brad Shepik and Tony Scher on bass, and Joe, and it was mostly Joey's music. And we did one recording. Actually, Adam Levy was the other guitar player for the first year, and we did a little recording at Tony Scher's that Joey had some CDs printed up. It was just a short, you know, record, and it sounds really cool. But then Adam moved back to California. This is 1999, and then we got Brad, and then that we lasted another 9 years simply because there was an agency in Austria that kept booking that loved Joey Saudades, and they kept booking like 3-week tours for us every year. I wish we would have done a record with that group because by the time, say, year 8 or 9, we had gotten into such a thing. That group was maybe a little more similar to Patitucci group, like because we played everything, funk, swinging, out, you name
When you're
it.
playing when you're playing with two guitars, I mean, does it almost take the pressure off in some sense that other guitarist can take over a certain position, let you breathe a little bit, but at the same time, inspiration's pouring out of them that play your same instrument. Like, are these things that you think about? Because like I had mentioned, like it's just such a cool thing to for two guitars. To,
Yeah, it's not so much that I wouldn't think of it as taking pressure off. It's just having maybe a horn that can comp.
yeah,
You know, because guitars are like, we can be like pianos, we can be like horns.
sure.
When we play a melody, it can really stand out like a horn. But then we can come back and comp and sparingly too, you know. But I should mention these other two guitar groups just because there are so many. Ben Allison had one with Brandon Seabrook and myself. Well, this was already like 12 years ago. And Brandon plays he's probably, that was a two guitar thing where that was probably the most different I'd been from someone. And yet it felt so compatible and amazing. It's because Brandon's a great musician. He listens and he listens what's happening, and it was so cool. And then Ben had another later, a two guitar group with Chico Pinheiro and myself, which is definitely more Brazilian type of compositions. And that was great. I'd played with Chico before in a project that Anthony Wilson had put together where we played on John Monteleone's Seasons guitars for a Met Museum concert, which was recorded and videoed and everything, with also Julian Lodge as a part of that. And so I knew Chico, and you know, I loved playing with all these guys. Also, Adam Nussbaum had the Lead Belly Project band with Nate Radley and myself. No bass this time. Ohad Talmor on tenor. That was a blast. And in that situation, I would say that took pressure off to have another guitar without bass.
Right.
You know, I've done trio without bass with Adam Coker and Billy Mintz, which is a blast. I love it. But when Adam Nussbaum had this idea of doing Leadbelly's music, and I think having the two guitars helped a lot for us to shape the music a certain way. As Adam says, Leadbelly played 12 strings, so I needed two guitars to make 12 strings.
Yeah, you've been a part of so many of these great bands, but also played with these, like I meant, larger than life jazz legends, Paul Motian, Charlie Hayden and stuff.
Man, I'm lucky. I'm forever great. I know exactly how lucky I am.
Okay, and I'm lucky to be asking the questions about it. So,
No, it's great, and yet I just love playing music, and I think probably my strongest suit. It's not like I never thought of myself as like the star soloist that stands out in front of the band. I love interaction from a rhythm section. I like when the music has a conversation in it. And I think because of that, and also I just like to make the music sound good in a band. And maybe that's why I get hired more is because I'm a team player.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
You know?
as a fellow guitar player, I'm guilty, and I'd like to be more like that. But this conversation will inspire me to, which no, but this is great, and Steve, I'm so appreciative for you taking the time to speak with me. Where can everyone find you? Social media and website, all that good stuff.
Well, on Instagram, it's Steve Cardenas Music, and Facebook, and it's just Steve Cardenas. I used to have a page. It's Steve Cardenas Music, but somebody from Indonesia took it over, and I haven't
Oh
been able
man,
to get it back. Yeah, and of course, Facebook is nowhere to like no response. It's the
yeah,
classic.
beautiful. No,
But
thanks so
they
much.
haven't done anything nefarious, so
Yeah, they didn't steal your credit cards or anything.
no, nothing. Man, but yeah, that's where I can be found in terms of social media.
Beautiful.